All right, welcome back to VIBE Edu and Happy New Year, as this is the first series of 2026. So for everyone on the screen and everyone that's listening, I hope that you had a wonderful holiday season. I know everyone's headed back very soon. Please don't shoot the messenger, but I hope you had a wonderful and relaxing time. I know we all have been hanging out with family, friends, doing all of the holiday things, but today we're coming back with a brand new series. I hope everyone had a chance to go and check out the mailbag episode. That was our third of what we've been doing, where we've been asking questions from those who are listening. But today we're going to talk about the new series, Myths of Teaching and Learning. And with that, I want to throw it to Mitch, but I'm going to throw it to TJ.
Well, listen, I mean, I'm inspired by the number of people who are gravitating towards my new LinkedIn newsletter about the fallacies of leadership, like things that people think are real and how to lead, and they're just not. They're not based on behavioral science or anything psychological in terms of influence. So this is a fitting, I think, topic for us in terms of things people think about in schools that are not evidence or research based. And so Mitch would be a great one to kick it to, I think, based on his work with executive functions. But I'll just start off because it still bothers me. And I think we brought it up on the show. It was, misinterpreted from Howard Gardner's work with multiple intelligence and the learning styles that people still say kids have. And I would rather use the word preference probably, because I do think there are learning preferences, but there aren't learning styles. We all learn pretty much the same way. We can come back to this too, because I think it's interesting that our brains are very much more alike than they are different, which again, we'll get to here on the show with all of this personalized and individualized learning, which I'm not against, but man, the idea that we're going to teach kids to a learning style, I think hinders things more than it does good. I like multiple modalities better than just one style per kid, because that's the way they like to be taught or whatever we've assessed about them. So I'll start there and kick it over whoever wants to go next.
Mitch. I'll jump in because I think that it's been true that, well said, TJ. We learn more, the majority of us, just saying, we'll pretend in a classroom, the majority of the learners are more alike than they are different. And we make the mistake. I mean, the idea of multiple modalities has been debunked. And it's good for teachers to know, because this is all wrapped up in the conversation around differentiated instruction. And there's been efforts, to differentiate according to learning modalities. And there's just a lot of work when as a teacher, if you're a teacher on the call listening to this, you know what I mean? Like the idea of having 5 different things for every type of learner in the classroom can be really overwhelming and oftentimes not really rooted in the science of learning. So when we look at differentiated instruction and how learners learn, if it's on average, and we consider MTSS or RTI, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 1 being the core general ed classroom, what I've read, the research and the information that literature I've been diving into, especially with writing the second book, is that you can kind of bank on about 80% of the learners in a tier 1 setting being more alike than they are different. And then the conversation gets really interesting with the 20%, which is all predicated on relationships and knowing who your learners are, and then figuring out, okay, how do I quote unquote differentiate, which is another word for UDL, Universal Design for Learning, for specific students perhaps, right? And how can I start to adjust for that 20 and keep my 80? It only works if there's solid research-based pedagogy happening in every lesson and activity. If not, then the whole thing just kind of breaks down. So it's an interesting conversation too, because as we differentiate, oftentimes the ability to choose my path. For example, I was just, when you say UDL, you think probably Katie Novak, and she's a friend of mine. We were talking a couple of weeks ago, and she was at a school, we're training on UDL. And one of the mistakes can be like, here's your choice board. You choose how you want to do this. And that's not to say that's not UDL or differentiated instruction. Her point is UDL without executive function doesn't work because, for example, this school had given students the option to take notes. They could either do Cornell note style. They could do, what do you call the picture one? Mm-hmm. I have some incredible, I don't know how people do that, but I have some, anytime I give a talk and someone does that, I take a picture of it because it's still amazing. Or they could use a device to take notes. And they were kind of lamenting, well, why isn't this working? And she's like, well, you have to spend 6 weeks, probably, maybe 4 to 6 weeks on each of those note-taking styles and deliberately and explicitly teach them to students, right? Direct, deliberate instruction on those and give them practice and coach them. And once they all have the skill set to take notes in all 3 options, then and only then can you put the choice board up and say, choose how you're going to take notes, right? That's differentiated instruction. It's not modalities. And we often give choice thinking it's good for students, and it may not be if they lack the skills and habits to follow that path. What do you think, Kim?
I was thinking, I was picturing myself in a classroom setting, thinking about year after year after year, especially with littles, going, here's a choice board, off you go. Like I could not even imagine teaching like that because they don't even know. They don't even know what they want to do. They don't even know how to be successful, right? Like they have not a clue. So I love what you said about explicitly, deliberately, intentionally teaching those 3 different ways, let's just say, and spending an exuberant amount of time, especially if you've got the littles in each of those. And then I would even say, come here, this kid, this kid, this kid, this kid, my outliers, and go, you know what? I want you to do this. And you two are going to do this. Because again, we can't expect that they're just going to know, because you could end up with kids just sitting there doing absolutely nothing because they have so many choices. And the choices could be, there's so many, could literally just be 3, but to them that's overwhelming. My brain also went to, I'll never forget sitting in a staff meeting one time, and a colleague of ours, she had been tasked to speak about UDL. This is like a decade ago. And I remember sitting there and I was like, oh, this is cool. Tell me, like, give me all the information, right? Let's talk about this. And she's like, okay, well, the first thing I want you to do is write a list of your outliers, your kids that tend to struggle in the classroom. And I literally wrote down almost my entire class, almost my whole class. I like probably had a list of probably 16 kids out of maybe 28 written down, right? So when you're talking about the percentage of kids, right? I was like, my whole class is struggling. My whole class is struggling with all these things. So like my outliers is my whole class. And then she said, specifically think about the things that you're putting in place for each of these kids to be successful. And I had a list of all of these different things, and nothing was, I don't know, a choice board or a first then or a sit next to me. It was like major, I was thinking, executive functioning supports in place to support them, truly, truly support them so they could get the job done and be successful. And I think that's where a lot of teachers get it wrong when they're thinking about learners. Your kids are, yes, similar brains, but they need different things to be successful, right? And you need to get to know them. You need to figure them out and their brains out to support them. But your systems, your routines, those things need to stay the same, right? Those things need to be explicit. So that's kind of what I was thinking.
And it's worth noting that choice isn't the end all be all, because I think oftentimes students will choose what they like or what's easiest, and learning should be hard at times, that desirable difficulty and finding that spot. So there's times where I think offering a choice board specific for students. We really have to be clear on why we're doing that, and not it just being the path of least resistance, because kids need to do hard things and struggle and be successful with that challenge. So worth noting, I think, when we're looking at differentiating.
Yeah,
Also-
school should be really hard to do, but not so hard to be successful at. I mean, that's the distinction and the nuance for me, is like making an assignment really hard doesn't mean that there's going to be all these low grades in a grade book. Like that part, that I think we've got to figure out. Like, and then I think these things are confusing for teachers, frankly. Meaning the choice and voice, I'm for, push my chips in, but it's misinterpreted. You know what I mean? Multiple modalities, show a video, have a reading. I'm for that, but it's misinterpreted that this kid's going to get the video and this kid's going to get the reading. You know, like you were saying with the choice board, the too much choice is bad, because the kids who struggle are going to always pick the path of least resistance. And so, yeah, it needs to be done well. I think for any teacher listening, one thing to get right is just the foundation of the classroom, the foundation of the learners. What are the basics, the routines, the things that we're going to expect kids to do? And in your example with the note taking, just to underscore, that means that every kid knows how to do all three of those note taking styles. They learned how to do all three, whether they liked it or not. It's then later when they get to make the choice for what their preference is. But they were, in a way, forced to learn a particular thing, because kids have to know stuff and they have to be able to do stuff. And a lot of times they have to know stuff before they can do stuff. And so that's like, I think that even the project-based movement, which we could get into, gets misinterpreted, that there's going to be all these open-ended questions and the kids are going to have productive struggle, when what are they productively struggling with if they don't know stuff that they're going to struggle to then apply? Yeah. And again, teachers, foundation. Let's go back to the foundation of teaching and learning, some explicit instruction, some I do, we do, you do kind of thing, and let's get that pedagogical part right for the learner before we start all this differentiating. And one final thing I will say, because you brought up MTSS and RTI, I can't say this enough to anybody who's listening. You cannot tier 2 and tier 3 your way out of a tier 1 problem. Back to the word foundation. If the tier 1 stuff isn't working, the tier 2 and tier 3 stuff's probably not going to work. That should reinforce tier 1, not be completely different from it. And I think we try to fix stuff through intervention versus
real quick, if you're listening and you're curious, like, what's the foundation? Start with routines. Period. And that's routines for the environment, like the daily learning routine. And once you establish it and have it rooted, like there's a reason behind the routine, and please reach out to any of us if you have questions about that. Like, it's not just routine for the sake of routine, but when you get your routine in place, never stray from it in terms of the larger overall learning routine. And then there's routines like the I do, we do, TJ's mentioned, that's like instructional routines. Things have some of that foundation, which I would argue is what I call clarity, modeling, and routine. But it's that routine piece is a really good starting place if you're curious about this, because what you will find is in a more predictable learning environment, students are more engaged, they feel better, and therefore they lean in more and take risks that are inherent to learning, because part of learning is failure. It's just how it goes, right? I'm willing to do harder things when I feel good. I was just talking to my daughter when we were camping last week about her favorite class. She's a sophomore at a big old public high school here in town, and she said, my favorite class is history this year. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. You're kind of, she's like a avid reader. She reads like crazy. So I thought, well, it's going to be English. She's an artist. So she's in their whole visual and art. I thought it's going to be her 2-dimensional art class. And she also has this like engineering mind, and she likes science class. And she's like, no, it's history this year. And I said, well, that's interesting. Tell me about that. And she's like, it's the only class I know what to do in. And that feels really good. Every day we start this way, and then we do this, and then we do this. And she said, and it never changes. So I know what to do. And in my other classes, I don't have that sense on the daily. So if you have that routine, that's the foundation that TJ's talking about.
And the stuff, like, she knows what to do, but then there's also, like, I can't highlight this enough for folks. There's stuff that the kids need to know. Like, I used to have kids tell me that in my class. They're like, we're really learning in here. Was that Emerald Lagasse who would say we're really cooking in here? But like, I think I've said that on the show before. I used to emulate that and say, we're really learning here. And kids would say, we're really learning in here. Well, it's because there's content that you're then using. Like, you learned the content and now you're using it. Feels really good to know something and use it. And especially if there's some struggle in, I know this, and now I'm trying to apply it in a way that's hard. But I think we've gotten too far away from content knowledge. The pendulum swung too far from having to know stuff. And I think
that's the teasing. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say, your daughter's history teacher, like, you know, in some cases, the pendulum didn't swing far enough, right? And we're just doing content knowledge. But in the case, I bet you, if you pressed on that, you'd find out that the teacher had some core knowledge that the kids need to know, and they follow a routine to be able to access that.
Access this, and like you're saying, do something with it as a byproduct of the routine. It's not just routine for the sake of routine. And again, I didn't press in, but that's like the whole point. Like, we know, back to the science of learning, how the brain learns, and new knowledge is built on prior knowledge. So if my routine allows me to access multiple times, which causes retrieval practice, which is using working memory, and all this is rooted in how we learn. But if that's all just happening as a byproduct of the routine, and I'm building new knowledge on prior knowledge, you got a winning formula. Josh, you need to say something, or I'm talking too much here.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm ready to like kick off another myth. So I know.
No, we're not going anywhere yet. Kim, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna say, well, a couple things. I want to go back to what we were saying about allowing a kid to decide how they want to be successful, and it just makes me think of my former student who came to VIBE Edu to speak, right, as a high schooler who really, really struggles with all things social, emotional, and executive functioning. And when given the opportunity to even like create a movie and to document whatever it was they were learning in history or whatever, it doesn't matter what it was, but she took it as like, I'm going to make this movie, and not only going to make this movie, but I'm going to animate the movie, and I'm going to do voiceovers, and I'm going to draw everything out, and I'm going to do this because that's just where this child's brain goes. And a intentional conversation with your class and knowing your outliers, right? Going, I know where your brain's going to go. And I have a feeling that you're probably going to want to do this, what I want you to do. And this is explicitly teaching them, we have this much time to get this project done. Think about how much time it's going to take to draw it out, to animate, to put it in, to do voiceovers. Do you think you have enough time to tackle that much? Because what ended up happening was very, very overwhelmed child, super, super stressed out, decided to then, got very upset, very angry on the daily. Mother's trying to support. So like, just think about the chaos that ensues when you expect that they just could do it. Yeah. And I think another thing is too, just because you have routines in place, you can't expect that a kid is going to follow through with the routine. You need other supports in place to support them with the routine. Even if it's just coming into the classroom, putting their folder down and getting to work. And you do that every single day. But guess what? You cannot expect that a kid is going to come in, put down their folder where you want them to, and get to work. There's explicit ways like front loading, acting it out, having visuals, having your visual supports, having, I would say, the working clock up there. Like all of those other things will then support. And again, I'm going to say those are all tier 1 supports in
They
place.
are. Well, and that's a clarity thing. So
Yes.
you establish your routine, you got to know the why. And everybody listening, my suggestion is that a byproduct of participating in whatever your routine is I get to practice a different executive functioning skill, right? So for the routine with Organized Binder and I unpack in books, my 2 books, the whole point is, of course, the routine and predictable, the more predictable the learning space, but I want you to have practice with these skills and habits on the daily, so that for us, the second step of the routine is taking out your calendar and updating it and modeling for students. Okay, this is due in a week and a half. Let's write that down on our calendar. And that has to be grade level appropriate. But for your student who was doing the video thing, if you would have that would have been part of the routine, and we mapped out in a project-based learning scenario, this is due in 2 weeks. Let's backwards map. It's all basic time management that we all know as adults. But giving practice with that sets them up for success in ways that aren't even, maybe we're not making that connection. But whatever your routine is, through the lens of clarity, how clear is it for students? Because you're right, Kim, we can't make assumptions of what kids are going to do, big or small. Period.
Yeah. So Josh's going to kick off another myth, but I'll just throw it to Josh to say there's also all of that routine stuff is behavioral prevention planning as well.
Yes.
I read a post that Josh put up on LinkedIn recently that I thought was fantastic. And one of the phrases that he put in there was boringly consistent, like to the point where the kid just doesn't even have to think about it. Right. And so that part of having to think about what is expected of me, that angers some kids. Yeah, I know that.
So you're saying boringly consistent, Josh, in a positive way.
Right.
Let's just speak clear, everybody. Okay.
So where it came from was actually Anthony Edwards. He's like one of my favorite players for the Minnesota Timberwolves. He actually said it in his training this summer. He was talking about that boring consistency piece of being great at the skills that he was doing on the basketball court, but that can translate to education also. And so that's what that's talking about, is that, sometimes it's not the fun things, but it's the things that we have to do to make sure that we're being great in whatever we're doing. And for what we're talking about, it's learning, right? And making sure that we're, as a teacher, making sure that the environment and everything that we're doing, the consistency that you're talking about, a lot of times what we're doing is we're inconsistent in our routines, which is creating chaos, but then we're also having a lack of clarity as far as what the expectations are for our students. And that's when we get into trouble. And so what that was talking about, TJ, was like the talking about student behavior specifically, and what we can do on the front end to be proactive so some of these behaviors don't even exist. And so I did steal that, but I thought it was a great lesson and something that can translate not only from the sports world but also into the classroom.
And the key word there for the classroom is automaticity. Right? If it's so automatic that I don't even have to think about it, what's really happening, if we go back to the science of learning, is I'm freeing up working memory capacity. And working memory is finite, as we know. And so the more of it that I have to use to try to figure out what's going on, to try to keep up with the routine or the instruction, whatever it might be, if I'm having to think about it, then I'm using some working memory. And so therefore I have less to focus on the things on that desirable difficulty. It's hard stuff I'm trying to learn. And that's where, Josh, what I hear you saying is we get classroom management issues, and it's kind of like we're looking at the kid like, what is going on? And it's not the kid, it's us. That's the art of teaching, is figuring all of that out so that I can free up working memory capacity. So I'm therefore more likely as a student to demonstrate goal-oriented behavior, manage my body and myself, be able to, even though recess is coming up, I can stay focused before I leave. All those things are related to working memory capacity. So if we're through the lens on this, it's cognitive load, and how much am I using to just keep up or try to figure out what's going on. There could be that choice board. Well, I don't have any clue. I got 5 options. Which is the best one? That's all working memory. And it might be through the, like, I'm trying to be creative. It's like, tell teachers all the time, don't mess with your routine. You want automaticity. Yeah, but that seems boring. And I love that line, Josh. I'm totally going to steal that. Yeah, it might
That
be.
part is.
Be creative with your lesson. Do creative things. Not saying that, but this part, it's just automatic. I don't have to even think about it. And we cannot even start talking about accountability, holding students accountable, until we have that kind of clarity in the classroom. Right? So I can't come to a student and say, like, hey, this is if the kid can't figure out the routine, then I have no business holding them accountable for said routine. Right? The special ed director said it to me. We were doing classroom walkthroughs this last year, and I may have mentioned this on the show because it really stuck with me, because this project in Tucson was half funded by special ed and half gen ed kind of funding. And so I was doing classroom walkthroughs with the special ed director for the district, and she said, we're loving what we're seeing, of course, around executive functioning with organized minors, great, blah, blah, blah. She's like, but I got to tell you, what my team and I love the most is two things. One, you walk into the classroom and all the students have the same materials. So it feels really inclusive. You can make assumptions about who's in the room, but you can't tell. And two, we know exactly the routine. It's so clear that we as an outsider can walk into this learning environment and pick it up. She said, so often our aides and our paras and the kids with the IEP, like, if the adult is sitting next to the kid that they're supposed to support in that tier 1 space, and the adult can't figure it out, how's the kid going to figure it out? And not just that kid, probably most kids, right? So the clarity piece.
It makes it easier to help the teacher too. So the special ed director knows what they're looking at. Half the time, even as like the walker-throughers and the observers, we're not entirely clear on what we're going to comment on. If there's a routine that's in place in every classroom and it's that consistent, and a teacher's not following it, for example, we can then help them get back to center by using some walkthrough feedback or some observational feedback for a teacher based on something that we already have established as clear for expectations for everybody in the school. I love that part. I don't know that we always come back to it. And I know we're going to do a piece on the school environment and the school leader and their role in all of this coming up in a full episode on that. But when those routines are that clear, boy, does it help us to be able to provide feedback for teachers when they're not quite doing it the way that they're supposed to. We're all clear on that part. I also wanted to say one more thing about automaticity, and then Josh has another myth for us to bust.
I got something else to say, Josh. Sorry, hold on. I got something after this.
Maybe we don't get to it. That's fine.
We can get to it. Creativity is a buzzword. This is another, I'll do it like a mini myth. Creativity is a buzzword in education. I go back to knowing stuff. Unless the kids can do something already automatic with content, they're not going to be creative with it. We're expecting creativity in the classroom too soon. Creativity comes after we know something. And this is totally relatable, but that's why like a lot of our great ideas come when we're on a walk or in the shower, because we already know how to do that. We do that routinely enough that then our brains free up that cognitive load to do something or think about something creatively. Kids are the same way. So expecting creativity too early in a lesson or in a unit, that doesn't work either. Josh, what's the other myth?
No, hold on. I gotta say one thing. Because when you get a shared routine, right? And this is getting back to the why of the foundation. Why are you doing the routine you're doing? You got to be clear on that. There's got to be a reason. But if it makes sense and it really does lay that foundation, then what we can make a reality is collective efficacy, because it's grade level and subject area agnostic. It's routines. It's the rhythm of the day. It's how we do school. And if we can share that, like, so in this organized binder setting, imagine a middle school, 6, 7, 8, for example, and kids, it's the same routine. Now walk into any classroom on campus, and this is how we start. This is how we transition. This is where we put our stuff. They're getting practice with these executive functioning skills in all these different learning environments. different grade levels, different subjects. But when we look at, school change, the research is very clear that we can't expect outcomes unless the initiatives are implemented by the majority of teachers. Very well documented. But this goes back to the leadership, TJ and Josh, which I know this will resonate with you, is that the initiatives have to be able to be implemented by the majority of teachers. And so there's got to be some content agnostic work that we're doing, because then we can all rally around that together. And that's what collective efficacy is. But we're so siloed by definition in schools. It's just how the structure is. So how do I get collective if you teach third and I teach fourth, or you teach seventh grade ELA, I teach eighth grade math, you teach, we're siloed. But if we can get collective with clarity, modeling, and routine, all of a sudden we have a shared language, we have a shared way of being. It's really powerful, which is why it has the biggest effect size of any strategy studied. Okay, I'll shut up. Josh, go ahead. You should have passed it to me at the beginning. I didn't realize I had so much to say on this topic. I'm going to shut up. I have a bunch more I want to say right now, but go ahead. What's this next myth? I don't even know, but I'm ready.
Oh, I was just going to throw a bomb in the show and just throw up another topic. And I wanted to see TJ's head explode, really. That's really what it was coming down to. There's already alarms going off. Goodness. All right. So we were talking about inconsistency, talking about lack of clarity. We're talking about sometimes measurements. I know, TJ, you were talking about feedback. So all that came to me was thinking, okay, well, what about the myth of the current grading system actually providing feedback that's enhancing the learning environment and proving mastery of students?
Say that one
because
more time.
If I'm pushing back on that, I'm going to say that it actually is the opposite in most situations.
Yeah, it's so
Josh,
true.
can you say that, rephrase it? Say that again. There was an alarm.
Yeah, I was just talking about the current grading system.
Set the alarm off here. And now it's raining, so I'm a mess.
I was just talking about the current grading system is a myth, that it's actually creating a lot of things. One, accurate feedback. Two, a reward system that students actually feel is something that is going to create extrinsic rewards versus intrinsic. We're also looking at averages. We're also looking at, things that are put in the grade book. For instance, the sign syllabus. How is that actually showing mastery of the content? And I can probably list off another 10 things. I can already see TJ's brain moving here. And I'm just thinking too, as far as a 0 to 100 scale is actually going to prove that they actually understand the content, right? So for instance, if a teacher was to give an 82 versus a 78, is there any distinguished value there for the student to understand? Am I mastering the content? What are the things that I need to learn? How can I improve? There's a lot of things, right, as far as the measurement system.
So in other words, grading is subjective. And we have to be really careful with that.
It all goes to what you're talking about before, as far as that consistency thing, right? I mean, also in a secondary situation, if I go to my math class, the grade book's going to probably look far different than when I go to a history class. And I bet as a science teacher...
Go ahead, Josh.
No, I was just thinking, as far as content goes, as far as like a measure of feedback going, like for instance, in Texas, and I'm going a lot of different directions in this because I feel so passionate about how jacked up the system is. In Texas, if you don't have a 70 or higher, you're failing. So that means from 0 to 70, the scale is tilted to failure.
And the conversation is not about learning anymore then.
Right.
Isn't that the whole point of this, what we do, is young people learning stuff?
So my mind went to when you were talking about the struggle of school, correct? Well, there is a struggle of school, but unfortunately it's a tilted system that actually makes it so that it's more about failure than it is about success, just based on the grading system alone, which is an inaccurate measure.
Yeah, I think at any level, like I've said this on other shows and stuff, when people ask the question, what's the one thing you would change about schooling? Maybe it's not the one thing I would change, but it's the first thing that I would try to change. And it's the easiest to change at the classroom level. So the more you get, climb up the ladder of administration, teacher, leader, we've talked about this on the show, assistant principal, assistant superintendent, director, whatever, the more layers that you have to change below, the harder it is. So this is for classroom teachers. The person with the most autonomy about grading is the teacher. And even if the school system uses that 70 thing and this rubric over here and this, you still have a lot more autonomy than you think. And it is a major myth that grading has something to do with learning. And grading doesn't have anything to do with learning. And it is the first place that I would go if I was a teacher listening. I would turn it as far upside down as I possibly could. There's no reason to use an average as a measure of central tendency. The 100-point scale, I'm actually for subjective. Like I would, because it's already so subjective, just let it be. Like let the teacher make decisions about the student performance. And I would go as far as, like, I could push on this all the way to the point of, who are we to judge a student's work? Unless it's a test, which I still believe in testing kids. You've got to know this stuff. You either know it or you don't. But then when we want to get to the project and to the creativity, there's part of me that just says, but who am I to grade somebody's creative work? Like, just because I'm the teacher, I get to evaluate this thing that this kid did. I'm not sure that's the level of authority we should exert on young people while they're trying to do cool stuff, if we've set up cool stuff for them to do.
I think a lot of teachers, at least what I know to be true, but with the teachers that I work with, elementary school teachers, majority are, right? It's like report cards are a real big struggle for teachers, because when they have to write in the comments, as an elementary school teacher, you got to comment, right? And when you're saying that a kid is struggling and struggling and struggling and struggling, and you got to put in a comment, usually what I hear from teachers is, my principal doesn't like the comments that I'm writing. And what I ask is, well, what are the comments? What are you saying? And what they're doing is they're just repeating that they're struggling. That's it. And what I want, and I know to be true from principal perspective too, is, well, what are you doing, teacher, to support that kid so that they aren't struggling? And what I have to continuously remind the teachers that I work with is, you're doing so much. So put that in there. I would like them to use the visual support that's on their desk so that they know blah, 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 blah. I would like them to act out, to visualize their path before we transition. I would like them to look at our board so that they can see visually the steps that they need to take and what comes next. I want them to use that clock and see the chunk of time that they have so that they get their work done in the time allotted. It's the teacher that's doing these things, but I'm writing down in that comment section what, again, the gentle reminders of the things that you're already doing, that you're already put in place, that are routine, that are clear, that are going to support a struggling kid. And I think that is something that I know it's so tricky for teachers, because they just want to say, I need them to do this and move on. Well, what are you doing to support them so that they can do it? And I think that is something that we definitely need to talk about.
I think that's more useful than what you had previously described, right? There's no doubt. Like, here's what we want the kid to do, to be able to do, which implies that they're struggling to do it, right? So you don't have to say they're struggling. You actually, when we train people on feedback, one thing we say all the time is, you actually don't have to tell someone that they're doing something poorly to help them fix it. So that's a feedback tip. You don't need to say the kid's struggling to get them to not struggle. You just need to help them with the thing they're not struggling with. My question, I think, to Josh's bigger systems point, is for the teacher, for the parent, for the kid, for the administrator who's looking at those comments and doesn't like them, which, by the way, that's the exact same thing. I don't like your comments. That's it's so parallel. I don't like your comments. the exact parallel to here's what I want you to say instead of the comments, which is your point about the kid. But anyway, my question for the whole system is, what's the utility of any of that? Are the parents reading that? Or parents of struggling kids in classrooms, are they really reading that? Like the standards-based movement on the report card, and the teachers pouring Saturday, Sunday, and nighttime into all these different grading standards. Who's looking at that? Is that, if the utility of that was there, the system would be fine. The kids would be doing great. Like, we pretty much have the evidence that the report card, the grade, all of that is not supporting learning. Like, I don't know. I'm spending any time on that, and we spend so much time on it. I just don't know if that's where I would want my teachers spending their time. Even the comments. Like, I don't know.
The system,
the comments are flawed. Like the preemptive comments that you have are flawed. And I actually brought this up to the districts because they mandated our teachers to put in a comment, right? And it's like a number system, 1 through 8, and each number has like a little designated sentence or whatever for each kid. 80% of them were negative. I was like, so the system, right? Like, our teachers are mandated 80% of the comments are going to be negative to my parents. Like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's asinine. So there's only 2 of the 10 comments are actually positive for the kids. Like, just that alone, that system is again going toward what I was talking about before, which is failure. Yeah. And the feedback is poor. Right.
Yeah, but
let's get everyone to hate the school, please.
Yeah, no, I'm saying on top of that. So I agree with everything that you've said and what Kim was saying to coach the teacher on writing a better comment if they have to write a comment and there's a comment spot and all that. But my point is, if a kid's doing well in school, they got straight A's on the thing and they got the comment number 3, that means they're a pleasure to have in class. And they take that home to their mom and dad, and their mom and dad sit in a special chair in the living room and they look at the A's and they say, great, we correspond the 3 to the rubric over here, and it's a pleasure to have, and all your teachers said you were a 3. Okay, I think that's happening. But the kid with the executive functions issue, and they've been suspended before, and they're struggling in school, and they have all these comments on there, and that kid has to put that in the backpack or file it electronically for the parent to log in with a login, and they're going in there and they're corresponding the 3 to struggles with it. I don't think that's happening. That's my point about the utility. I just don't think that for the kid who struggles, the kid with the D lower than a 70, I just don't also think there's an environment at home where the parents are going, hey, your teacher wants you to use your visual chart at the table. Like, and I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just saying, I don't think the system is going to support the learner through that mechanism. That's all I'm saying. So spending a lot of time on it just doesn't seem like the best way to train our teachers and to spend their precious seconds and minutes.
Okay. And also think about this, the principals who think that that's the number one, the principals that read all the comments from every single teacher with every single student. And then they say, okay, teacher, no, you need to go back and you need to redo your comments. You need to redo your comments for all these kids. Like, think about that. That's time from the teacher. That's time from the principal. It's just like, and to your point, if you have a parent at home that can't even put that together or doesn't even look at it, then what is the point of it in the first place? Yeah.
And especially if to Josh's point, now I've got to get this report card signed, right, and come back for my 100 points on the report card signature from my parent. Holy moly. It's a myth. It's a great myth, Josh, that has anything to do with getting kids to know and be able to do stuff.
Right.
Well, and
in the same way.
Go ahead, Mitch. You wanted to say something before.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think I would throw the whole idea out, though. It's just it's the same conversation we were having around routines in the classroom. If there's no clarity around the routine, me trying to hold the kid accountable for participating in the routine makes no sense. And so I think the idea of teacher comments, parents reading them, a mechanism between to and from school, I feel like what I'm hearing in that as well, and from my own practice, is there's just so much ambiguity there. Like we're just assuming someone's going to read. It's the same thing with student feedback. If you're going to take your time to comment on something, you better be damn sure the next day when you hand that back, there's a moment in time where everybody reads the comment I made. If not, why am I wasting my time? Right? On whatever it is. And we could get into a whole homework myth thing as well. But right. Yeah. So to the point of like having those comments and having some metrics and grades and things that go home to parents, I don't necessarily think it's something we should throw out just because it's such an egregious waste of time.
But I would call that I would just call that two-way communication or feedback. I wouldn't call it grading. I agree with you. Like I think that type of mechanism, but the same thing applies to the parent. Like just sending a comment home or a report card home to a parent without a routine at home, for to have the moment, the moment, as you call it, the space for that to be useful. But that type of back and forth, I would consider that to be communication from the classroom. The problem is then when it comes with the 72 C minus number 3, and I've got to figure out where the rubric is of what that number 3 means. I've looked at my own kids' report cards and go, what's this 3? I'm like, I don't know where the 3 came from, and literally dismissed it.
Yeah. And your kid doesn't know. I don't know what the 3 means.
School. So I'm like, aren't we living in an age where like it just says it there, not the 3 anymore? So the communication, thought, this doesn't mean anything. This is a random 3.
And in that sense, throw it out. I would throw the baby out with the bathwater. But if it's themed, if it's communication, we also need to make a point that communication should not only happen at the report card time. Like the communication mechanism, if I can establish a routine with the families that I'm serving as a teacher of their kid, again, that's back to the clarity, and then me being able to come to them and be like, hey, I've made this so simple, so routine. This is my expectation of you for us to help your child be successful. And then I can pick up the phone and be like, hey, have you seen, like, I'm not seeing it, whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
There's just, it's the same thing, clarity and routine with the families, and not just waiting till the report card to figure out what a 3 is.
We did it.
We did it. Should we wrap it up?
Yeah, I know. Because I wrote down all my notes to save for next time.
Yeah, I know that each one of these myths could easily have been just one show. So I'm excited about some additional myths that are going to come up. Again, this is the Myths of Teaching and Learning series that we're going to be doing. It's a 4-part series. This is just the first of the myths. So super excited about where we're going to go with this. As I was happy to drop a bomb in the middle of this episode to get us going. But Mitch, I know you're on your way out here soon. But I just wanted to say that if you need anything, of course, all of our information is in the show notes. So definitely reach out. We got some really fun announcements for the upcoming year of 2026. This VIBE Edu crew is just getting started, and we've got so many things that are coming at you here very, very soon as we are kicking off the new year. But again, we are so excited to not only serve you in this podcast, but we're going to have a lot of additional items for you here soon in the future. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful week.